Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the TechSideline podcast. We record on Monday, October 25th, following the Hokies' heartbreaking loss to Syracuse in Lane Stadium on Saturday. This is episode 202 of the TechSideline podcast. We're going to go through how the Hokies blew another lead, 9 points in the final few minutes, the surprising play of the Hokies offense, and where they go from here with 4 of their last 5 on the road. All of that and much more coming up on episode 202 of the TechSideline podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you in if you are listening archived on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching archive, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching live, drop a comment or question down below for David or Chris, and we'll get to those at the end of the episode with Nick. As always, the TechSideline podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. You can help bring Olympic hopeful athletes to Blacksburg with one of the fastest growing and best wrestling programs in the nation. Go to southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. We are still missing our head honcho, founder, and chief on episode 202 of the TechSideline podcast, and Will Stewart. He is down in Florida. So once again, for the second straight week, we have David Cunningham across the way, the managing editor for TechSideline. As always, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman to my left. Behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart always does a great job as the best podcast producer in the land. And in the fourth chair today, as always, on Mondays, it'll be Nick Brown. He'll have his segment in the middle of the show and then get to your YouTube comments and questions at the end. Well, guys, it was a tough game on Saturday. But before we get into that, Chris, you at least had some silver lining on Saturday night. Your Braves are going to the World Series.
Going to the World Series? I'm going to the World Series.
Yes.
So I'm going to apologize in advance if there's no Sunday article after Georgia Tech.
I will not blame you.
I'm going to the Friday and Saturday night games, and I'll be flying back to Virginia on Sunday, and I'm actually flying in and out of Richmond instead of Roanoke, so I'll also have a 3-hour car drive after I get back. But so apologies in advance for that, but you know,
I
think
at this
lifetime
point, possible.
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, even if Tech wins, like, I don't think it's going to be like, I don't think I could say anything more about the program than I've already said in writing and everything like that. So I figure if I'm going to pick a year to go to the World Series, you know, this would be the one, right?
Yeah.
And I think Will, deep down, is probably glad that he got the hell out of Dodge this week, too, because there's just not a lot of new things to talk about.
Yes, Will's still in Florida. He should be back for Wednesday's episode of the podcast. Like you, the Hokies will be down in Atlanta this weekend, so we'll get into Georgia Tech on Wednesday. Forgot to mention, I'm Jake Lyman. I'm your host, as always. Always got to introduce yourself. But let's dig into the Hokies and Syracuse on Saturday. This was the Hokies' third straight loss. Notre Dame, Pitt, and Syracuse, 3 straight weeks, all inside Lane Stadium. And this one kind of had the exact same thing as Notre Dame. You're up late, 8 points in Notre Dame, 9 points against Syracuse, and somehow find a way to lose. Just a tough sequence of events there for the Hokies down the stretch.
You know, one of the things Virginia Tech has managed to avoid doing during the Justin Fuente era is allow big returns on special teams. And even he said in his press conference today that he thinks, as far as he can remember, that kickoff return by Syracuse after Tech went up by 9 was the first time in his career that an opposing team had returned a kickoff past the 50-yard line. So, like, it's something different every week, it seems like. I ran some numbers for my article yesterday, and I used Pro Football Focus to look up Garrett Schrader's big-time throw rate, which is only 3% on the season, which is 109th out of 138 quarterbacks who have 100-plus dropbacks on the year. So that's horrible, quite frankly. He can't hit a ball downfield to save his life. He can't make a good throw down the field to save his life. I mean, his passes look like a shot put.
Yep.
And yet he hit that one. It reminded me of, like, it was the same thing a couple years ago with Bryce Perkins at UVA when he dropped that dime down the right sideline. And his big-time throw rate, I think, was even lower than Schrader's. He was a guy who all year had not shown the ability to throw the ball accurately down the field against tight coverage. And yet he did it at that moment in time. And that's what Schrader did the other day. And he did it while Jordan Williams was playing him into the turf. It's just, statistically speaking, it's probably the most unlikely play. I mean, if you told me before the game that like, yeah, Schrader's going to win the game in the last 2 minutes with his arm, and I'd be like, no chance. Yep. No chance.
Yeah,
but he did.
Because you thought Syracuse was going to win on a field goal.
Yeah, I thought they were going to win on a field goal. Instead, the Luke Rosa Award winner bounced it off the upright.
On a 30-yard field goal.
Right, and then had an extra point block, which Tech returned. So Tech stole 6 points from the kicking game.
Yeah.
And if you'd told me that before the game, I would have said, I'm picking Tech. But like I said, man, it seems like it's something different next week. Maybe we could start taking bets for next week and see if we can come up with new and creative ways.
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things is that Schrader is not even like outside of big time throw rate, he's not a good passer in general.
54%.
And he was, he completed, I think, 43% of his passes.
He was like 16 to 34 or something like that.
Yeah, but he
236 yards.
But he had 2 touchdowns and he threw for more yards than Burmeister did.
The disappointing thing was, it's for most of the game they couldn't pass. You remember when they started their 98-yard drive?
Yeah.
And at that point they had 3 passing yards the entire game. And then they hit that little 10-yard screen to give them a little cushion. And then they hit a couple passes down the field. They drove 98 yards, and 2 or 3 of their key plays on that drive were through the air. And then they made key plays through the air on their last 2 drives. They spent 90% of that game not being able to throw the football. But when the 10% of the time when they needed to throw the football, they were able to do it. And that's the most disappointing part to me.
So on that drive, after a false start backed them up to like the half-yard line,
Yes. Right.
they had a pass for 10 yards, a pass for 7 yards, a pass for 38 yards, and a pass for 24 yards, all before Schrader scrambled a couple times and then he ran in from 9 yards
and
out.
like I said, I believe before that drive started, they had 3 passing yards.
They hadn't moved the ball much at all through the air, and Tech was fairly solid up to that point in terms of rush defense, and then it was kind of just from there Syracuse found its way offensively through the air.
Yeah, and if you let offenses be balanced, they're going to be really difficult to stop. I mean, I thought Tech was going to struggle to stop the Syracuse running game, but I thought, like everybody else, they would do just fine against Syracuse's passing game, and the Orange would be one-dimensional. And I picked Syracuse to win, but I picked a 23-21 game or something like that. I did not see the passing explosion from Syracuse. I did not see the running explosion from Virginia Tech. It's a lot of random things happening this year sometimes. Like, even the games that you're picking to be close, like we all picked UNC game to be close, the West Virginia game to be close, the Syracuse game to be close, the Notre Dame game to be close. The only game we didn't pick to be close was Pitt. And from a closeness standpoint, we've been dead on as far as all that goes. But a couple of those games, like the UNC game was a lot lower scoring than we thought. The Notre Dame game was a lot higher scoring than it seemed like it was going to be. This game was a lot higher. Yeah, exactly. So the kind of the results are kind of what we expected as far as a closeness standpoint of all these games, but the road to get there is way different.
It's up and down and up and down. And up and down.
And I'll tell you what, if you were a neutral fan the other day and you just randomly turn on a Virginia Tech Syracuse game, if you live somewhere where it happened to not be blacked out, which is apparently rare, you would have been really entertained. I mean,
great game.
You got a lot of offense. You got passing. You got rushing. You got
touchdown with 19 seconds left.
Wild plays.
Field goals bouncing off uprights.
Field goal block.
Return
for a touchdown.
Off of a fumble.
Crazy. So if you were like a neutral fan and you turned it on, you're probably like, man, I really enjoyed watching that game.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this after West Virginia, after Notre Dame, and now Syracuse. 3 games that really came down to one play. And I think something that I've noticed is a trend. West Virginia, the Hokies just did not make the one play they needed to win the game on 3rd and 4th down at the 3-yard line at West Virginia. Notre Dame, they went and made the plays. The 2-point conversion to tie that game was just a guy going up and making an athletic play. Yeah. Same thing with the touchdown against Syracuse. Jordan Williams plants Garrett Schrader in the turf, and he still makes a 40-yard throw downfield into tight coverage. it seems like when it comes down to that one game-changing play, it just hasn't gone the Hokies' way this year.
Yeah, and it's something different each week, it seems like. Fuente said this morning that Tech busted the coverage on that play, that based on how Syracuse aligned, they should have changed their pre-snap coverage to something else. And for whatever reason, whoever was responsible for that did not change it, or it did not get communicated correctly to all the defensive backs. And they got caught in the wrong coverage and got burned. But even with that, it's still a throw that Schrader hadn't made all year. Yeah. And his receivers hadn't made any plays for him.
And Dorian
all year.
Strong had a hand.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Strong's got to get a little stronger. It's like he needs some weight room time, but you can say a lot of Tech players need some weight room time, right? And Strong picked a bad time to have the worst game of his career. And I'm not pinning this on Dorian Strong because I think he's a good player, but it's something different every week, right? And I never would have said before the game, oh, you know what, we're going to lose this game. Dorian Strong's going to have a couple plays where he's right there and he's got his hands up. He just doesn't make the play on the ball, because when that happened to him against UNC earlier this year, against a better receiver probably, he made the play. Yeah. So I don't know, man. Sometimes it's just when it's something new every week. I mean, if it was one problem, it's simple. You just fix that problem.
That's the one.
Yeah. But this is the problem on Saturday was something that hasn't been a problem all year.
Yeah.
Well,
secondary.
That's exactly where I wanted to go with this. When you guys made your predictions last week, and we talked about keys to the game on Wednesday's podcast, and we didn't even go through them. I just said the key is to score points. If I told you Virginia Tech would score 36 points, not turn the ball over, and rush for 260 yards, you would have said it's a 20-point win.
Yeah, I would have absolutely said Tech would have won that game by 2 or 3 touchdowns, handily, if you had told me that before the game.
I would have said the same thing, considering how the defense has played so far this season, how and as I wrote in my recap of the game, there wasn't a game this season where the defense lost Tech the game. The defense played well enough to keep Tech in the game, and the offense just wasn't there. If you told me that, I would have been like, 100%, that's a win, no questions asked. And here we are.
I think David would have had somebody institutionalized if they told him that, because he had the Hokies scoring 10 points.
Yeah. Well, and as we discussed before the podcast, I said, and as I said last week, show me where Virginia Tech has played well offensively. And as we talked about, you, Will, and I texted, and I asked Justin Fuente after the game about if he had worked more with the first team offense this week. He was like, yeah. And
he kept it very short.
And
I made it very clear.
Yeah, well, this was, of course, after somebody asked about his job. But I mean, I think that helped a little bit. But it's, after scoring 7 points last week and barely almost losing the scoring streak last week against Pitt, coming out and scoring 36 points, I would have said 100% Virginia Tech wins by multiple scores.
We've seen Justin Fuente last year when he thought the defense needed a spark, or he thought the offensive scout team needed to be giving the starting defense a better look. We saw him take control of the scout team defense, and shortly thereafter, we saw him take control of the scout team offense. Right. Shortly thereafter, we saw the starting defense improve last year. And so he stayed in that role through the start of this year and was not a part of, or not nearly as much of a part of, Virginia Tech's regular offense. And they couldn't move the football. And now this week, he leaves the scout team offense, which means he leaves the preparations for Virginia Tech's defense completely in the hands of others. And he goes back to the offense and helps out over there. And just like that, we see the offense get better, and we see the defense get worse. So it's like Justin Fuente actually the only really good pure football coach on this staff? And I'm asking that question, and I'm very much aware of what is most likely going to happen to Justin Fuente at the end of the season. Yeah. And I think we're going to look back and probably say, like Frank Beamer before 1993, Justin Fuente's big problem was he didn't surround himself with enough good assistants.
Yeah. Well, and you could tell the offense had a spark. The offense was energized on Saturday. I mean, first quarter they came out were 4 for 4 on third downs. Yeah. Converted. And that's what happens, I guess, when Fuente takes over the first team.
Maybe he actually saw Malachi Thomas in practice, and he was like, because he didn't get to see Malachi Thomas in practice that much before during team sessions because he's over with the scout team.
Give
offense.
this guy more reps.
Why aren't we playing this guy? You know, I mean, my God. So, and now that you saw what happened, it kind of makes you think the same thing. Why aren't we playing this guy? Why weren't we playing this guy before? He's going to be playing now, and I from a long-term beneficial standpoint, like he's still a skinny guy.
Yeah.
Like his frailness of his body, he shouldn't be getting 21 carries in a game right now. He could end up getting himself hurt because he's just not going to be. Syracuse is a bunch of freshmen on defense. Every other defense Tech faces is going to be bigger, stronger, faster, more experienced. So I'm worried that he's not going to be able to handle that rush load, and you're going to look back and say, we should have just had that guy doing Big Squat Friday every week to prepare him for his future. Get him up to 205, 210 pounds, and then he's ready to roll next year as a redshirt freshman. Because I think if you're not going to redshirt him this year, which they can't do now anyway, I mean, is not redshirting him going to put Virginia Tech in a bowl game? I don't think so. So to me, it still becomes a wasted redshirt. That said, I totally understand why they and if you're going to burn that red shirt, you make it worth it. And to their credit, they made it worth it. Although I worry that his body's not going to be able to hold up with 21 carries a game from here on out. And I'm not saying he's going to get 21 carries a game, but that can't be the plan going forward, in my opinion.
Something we talked about last week was that when you are a college football program that hasn't ascended up to that top level, you're trying to sell hope to your fan base. You're trying to say, hey, we've got this future that we're going to be up there one day. Do you think maybe that was part of it? They have this guy, true freshman, who they're impressed with. Malachi Thomas may be one of those pieces that fans can look at and say, okay, there's at least a plan moving forward.
Yeah, and I would say one of the interesting things I think to go along with that is also that outside of Raheem Blackshear, there's been no production out of the running back room. I mean, Jalen Holston didn't have a carry on Saturday. Keyshawn King has
1.7 yards per carry.
Yeah, like when you're searching for answers offensively, when you've been as abysmal as Virginia Tech was in its first 6 games offensively, and you see, as I assume Malachi Thomas did, explode during practice, you go, maybe we should get this guy a lot more reps.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the 2015 season when it took them a month or 5 weeks to figure out that Trayvon McMillan was their best running back. And once they finally gave him the most carries, it was at that Friday night game against NC State, and he busted out for like 130, 140, 150 yards, something like that. You're sitting there like, why couldn't they see this before?
Yeah.
Right now, to be fair, when it's a true freshman, sometimes you don't necessarily see that early in the season. Sometimes those freshmen, it takes them a while, and then they hit a point, and then they bust through the freshman wall, and then they get better. So it's possible that Malachi Thomas really hadn't turned it on up until the last couple weeks or something like that. But still, like anytime you sit there and see, I mean, how many times do you need to see Keyshawn King carry the football and average 1.7 yards per carry before you figure out that somebody else has got to be better?
And you had said that you would prefer a smaller running back rotation, maybe 2. I think it seems like Malachi Thomas.
I mean, look, it's got to be those 2. I mean, it can't be anybody else now at this point, can it? If you're going to go with 2 guys, it's got to be those 2.
But you obviously can't get him the amount of carries he got on Saturday every single game.
Right.
But I mean, I think Raheem Blackshear, Nick, how many?
He had 78 yards on 10 carries.
10 carries.
He actually averaged more yards per carry than Malachi Thomas.
So you can
7.8 and Malachi 7.2.
So you can give Raheem Blackshear a little bit more carries and space it out, but like. 15, but that's 15. Your running back rotation. Right. You were searching for it, and now you found it.
You've got it. And Blackshear actually had, I believe, over 100 yards of total offense because he had the long catch on the screen pass too.
He had 30 yards.
So that's outstanding production from a 2-back rotation.
Yeah.
And I don't know whose responsibility it is to choose the running back rotation. I honestly I have no idea. I have no idea, but. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe when Justin Fuente goes back and takes more control of the offense in this week when. Just a decisive decision like that gets made.
Well, and last year we saw this running game. It was so effective. I believe the Hokies ran for 300 yards in the first 4 games of last season. And Khalil Herbert, who had a nice game yesterday again, 100 yards for the Bears. First 100-yard rusher that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have given up this year.
He's looking like a good bag.
And with no threat of a passing game to help him out either.
Yeah, and he had 5 catches for 33 yards, too.
Justin Fields had 5 turnovers.
Yeah, not a great game for the Bears.
No,
but
good game for Herbert
is the silver lining there. But if the running game can have that type of production, it seems like it kind of opened up the offense a little bit more.
Well, all right, yeah. So Virginia Tech was doing a nice job running the football on even that first drive of the game, and then bam, it just opened up the play action to Dulius for a touchdown. Yeah. And I think the defense took a step back this week, but if they can get back to playing how they were playing, and Virginia Tech can continue to run the football, and I'm not going to say that they're going to run for, how many was it, 260? I'm not going to say they'd run for 260 every week, but if they can be competent running the football from now on, and the defense can get back to playing how they were before Saturday's game, then they will have an opportunity to win football games between now and the end of the season. But you go back to what we were talking about earlier, it seems like there's something new that goes wrong every week.
Well, and you mentioned that first drive with the Dulius touchdown at the end. It seems like it's been a trend for the Hokies a lot that those scripted plays on that first drive have been great. And that was a perfectly run drive for the Hokies. But then it kind of stalled. David mentioned 4 for 4 on third down in the first quarter. After that, the Hokies 1 for 8 the rest of the way.
Yeah, that was tough. And I thought both teams stalled in the second quarter until Syracuse's 98-yard drive. At that point, that score was 14-7, and it was looking like that 23-21 game that I predicted, or the whatever. What'd you pick?
I don't know. My pick was 27-10, so it wasn't even close.
So you might have been close to the 10 for. Yeah. Well, actually, they'd already outscored.
Yeah, no.
So if that
first 2 drives,
it had stalled at that point, and at that point, when Syracuse has got to go 98 yards and they can't throw the football, and there's so little time remaining in the second quarter, you're like, I don't see how this one's going to be a high-scoring game. You wouldn't have looked at it right there and said, yeah, this game's going to be 41-36 at the end. And then both offenses started going off again in the second half. It's disappointing from the standpoint of you finally get something going offensively. And at this point, I don't care whether it's the running game or the passing game, just as long as it's something. And then it's all for naught in the end.
And you brought up the opening up for other things, and that's actually a question I asked Caleb Smith after the game, and I included in my article, and his response was, I feel like once we get that first explosive play of the drive, whether it's running or in the air, it lights a fire under the offense, and that really drives us. And Tech's passing attack, Burmeister was 10 for 20. He was not very good, but when you can run the ball, it gives you something to help carry the offense, and then you just have to, like you said, it opens up a little dink pass for Dulius, which is an easy completion for a touchdown.
Right.
And you mentioned 10 for 20 for Burmeister. I wanted to look back and just see how it kind of progressed for him, and I love Hokie the live stats for Virginia Tech. They have the QB progression. So Burmeister started with 5 straight completions, and he ended with 4 of his last 5 being completed. In between, from late second quarter to the early fourth quarter, he was 1 for 10.
Wow.
So
he was good at the beginning.
He completed 1 pass from, I believe, the second to last drive in the second quarter to the first drive in the fourth quarter. Which that your offense isn't going to do much when your quarterback completes 1 pass.
No,
in 2 quarters.
Yeah. So when you think about it from that standpoint, it's actually amazing that Tech scored 36 points.
Yeah, but that's Malachi Thomas, I guess.
Well, and a blocked extra point.
Yes, so they scored 10 points during that time. One was the field goal towards the end of the first half, and then they scored the touchdown, but that was only a 45-yard drive, I want to say, because the punt return put him at the 45. There was a punt return by
Tavion, that's right.
So
that's very impressive.
The run game looked good, but it seems like he's still struggling with an injury. There were a lot of passes 7 to 10 yards downfield that just were nowhere close.
Yeah, and it's just another game where you don't notice Trey Turner at all. There was another play this week where he ran a slant, and Burmeister threw it to him, and Turner kind of ducked, and I thought if he just reached his hands in the air, he could have caught it. Yeah. And it's almost like he was trying to draw a pass interference flag.
Yeah, it looked like he begged for the call after that play, but they showed the replay, and the defender lightly tapped him on the back.
Right,
and it looked like a flop. I was like,
oh yeah, It totally looked like a flop.
Yeah.
And if it did look like a weak push, but that's another thing. Like, if he was a little stronger from the weight room, then maybe that doesn't knock him up. But he did look like he went into it like trying to draw the flag. But as it turned out, I thought the ball was right there, and he could have reached up and caught it.
It was.
Yeah, but what's ironic is when I was over in Merriman earlier for the press conference, John Laser mentioned something to us just about how when he was talking with Mike Burnap on the radio, and at one point during the game he was like, Trey Turner is invisible, and then he said he looked at the stats and was like, no, he's more than invisible because he hasn't touched the ball. Nick, what was Trey's final numbers?
So Trey had this jet sweep, by the way, that was insanely successful for 26 yards. He had 26 yards rushing. He had another jet sweep that went absolutely nowhere. And then on the passing game, 2 catches for 12 yards and 11 total yards because the second one went for a loss.
Wow.
Okay.
And
Yes,
he's
sir.
and as we've talked about, he's you could say Tavion or Trey is the best receiver, but I mean you've got to get him more than 2 touches in the passing game.
Right. You do. And when you try to give him another one, he's got to go up and catch it.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know, just the passing game is broken, and you're beyond the point where you're like, it's not this player's fault. It's not that player's fault. It's not Braxton's fault. It's not Trey's fault. It's not Tavion's fault or Caleb Smith's fault.
It's not Caleb Smith's fault.
It's certainly not Caleb Smith's fault. Which, by the way, another seemingly very good game blocking. From Caleb
He also
Smith.
had, I want to say, 48 yards in the receiving game.
Yeah.
Okay, he had Caleb
And
Smith, he had,
he had the game-winning Hail Mary. That was a great play by him to tip it for Tavion to even have a shot at it.
Right. Yeah. The offense itself, like the passing game itself, I mean, it needs a reset, and it can't be resetted in the middle of the season either.
We've seen it over the last 5 games. The passing game has pretty obviously struggled. Do you think that James Mitchell may have been more of a safety blanket for the Hokies than maybe even people had thought he was?
Couldn't have hurt. Last year, I think he only caught 21 passes last year, but at the same time, how many of those were big passes?
Yeah.
Right? And I think he only caught 2 or 3 this year before he got hurt. But that one he caught against UNC when he smacked those dudes on the helmet and then just ran right by them. I mean, he's good for a play or 2 like that every game.
Yeah.
And that can be a big deal. I mean, that might have won Tech that UNC game. It allowed them an extra set of downs and able to run out the not necessarily run out the clock, but it took more time off the clock in the fourth quarter. So yeah, I mean, so many close losses this year, and a guy like James Mitchell could certainly make a difference. But the thing is, like, nobody else is playing well enough, and nobody else is coaching well enough to where you can say, oh, yeah, it's just because Tech lost James Mitchell. There's still enough on this football team where they should have been doing better the whole time, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I think he certainly helps. You go back to West Virginia, like I think he would certainly have helped inside the 10-yard line, and I think James Mitchell was always good for 1 or 2 throwback screens for 15 yards a game, but in all honesty, the offense. This offense has never. I mean, even when Dalton Keene was here, this offense, never. It wasn't like they were throwing to the tight ends 5 times a game. But yes, I do think that he would have provided a little bit more of a safety blanket, just a tall option, an athletic guy you throw it to when Braxton Burmeister's in danger.
Well, in West Virginia especially, it's hard to imagine if James Mitchell is out there the entire game, the Hokies score 0 points on 3 trips to the red zone.
Yeah, for sure. And right now, Tech's 2 best players are out. Mitchell's been out almost the whole season, and Jermaine Waller basically missed this past game with an injury. I think he was out there the first drive.
Yeah,
he had a boot on the second
He
half.
started, and he was out there at least the first. I don't know if he was out there the second drive.
4 plays.
Yeah, but he was out there. I
know it was 4
because
plays
they
'cause I
forced
saw
a
it on
3 and out
PFF.
on the first drive. And then he came off the field, and then he was done for the day.
Yeah, so I question why can't it be determined during pregame warmups or throughout the course of a week that a player's too injured to play?
Well, it's like Khalil Herbert.
Herbert against Liberty last year. James Mitchell against Liberty last year. I think he only played 5 or 10 plays, and Fuente's like, he can't play. He's got to get out. Like, why can't that be figured out in pregame warmups
when they're going through the motions?
Right, exactly. Well, you should be able to know it then.
The Herbert one was the most egregious. fielded the opening kickoff and they did not play another snap.
Right. And it just, you should be able to figure that out in the pregame. And you end up throwing a hurt guy out there, and you just run the risk that he's going to get hurt even more and miss even more time. So hope Waller's okay. Hope he didn't do any further damage to himself on Saturday.
Well, believe it or not, that was the positive segment of this podcast. We're going to talk about the defense and kind of where the Hokies go from here after the break. First, let's send it over to our fourth chair with Nick and see what he's got for today.
I'm going to start dubbing this segment the Scott Glessner segment because this man pumps out the most obscure and just, I'm going to say it, gnarly stats.
I think we need to get him in the fourth chair.
Yeah, I know. We need to get him in. You need to hire him. So the first time this is only the second time under Fuente, which had 2 touchdowns in the first 2 possessions. Wow. The other time was ironically
Tennessee?
No.
Oh, really?
Really?
Wait.
Georgia Tech in 2018 when they got blasted.
That's right.
Thursday.
That's right. It was 14-14.
Yes. Oh, yes. I do remember. Yeah.
And then Georgia
just
Tech
keep up.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech just
Well, you know what's
scored every
interesting?
other-
So I once that happened during the game, I was sitting in the press box and I said, that's the first time it's happened all season. I went and looked and I was like, yeah, okay. And because Tech scored, the only other time Tech had scored on its first drive, or I think they did it twice.
Carolina.
North Carolina and Richmond, I think they did it on the first drive of the game.
Yes.
But it's like after that, in both of those games, it just fell off offensively for the rest of the first quarter.
And what was funny was the Tech's first drive against Syracuse since took so long. Would it take 6.5, 7 minutes off the clock?
Yeah.
Something like that. So, and then by the time they got the ball back again, I mean, it seemed like more time had gone off the clock for them to just have 2 possessions.
Yeah, it was 6 minutes 21 seconds on the first drive, and then the second drive took 4 minutes and 56 seconds. So 2
Things were
long
going well.
drives. Yeah.
And then the other stat brought to you by Scott Glessner is Beamer in his first 6 seasons had 3 seasons where there was a 4-game losing streak. If Tech loses to Georgia Tech this week, very possible, then it'd be the third time in Fuente's first 6 seasons.
Third time in the last 4 years. Correct.
Yes, 2018, 2020, and 2021.
This means that Justin Fuente is going to be a Hall of Fame coach. And it only happened, the 4-game losing streak only happened one other time in the rest of Beamer's tenure.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Which I guess would be the end of the 94 season and the start of the 95 season. Because Tech started 0-2 in 95, and I know they lost their last 2, probably maybe their last 2 or 3 of 94. So yeah, not something that happens very often around these parts. And I see a lot of the same similarities that were hurting the program in 1992 as right now.
Yeah, as you detailed in your article.
Exactly.
Yesterday.
You know, I think Beamer obviously fired some assistants at the end of that year that didn't need to be coaching at this level, and then he came up with 20 key steps to a 7-win turnaround, as he called it in his book. But basically, he found ways to instill more discipline in his program. And honestly, I think those are the Virginia Tech's 2 main issues right now. I mean, it's like 92 all over again. To me.
Player development and discipline.
Yeah. So I think Tech. God, I think they went 2-8-1 in 1992,
Yep.
and 6 or 7 of those losses they were leading in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's where the chokies came
it just seems so similar this year so far, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here first from Chris. 2028 Hokies will be in the national championship game.
Yep. Exactly.
Also, I did want to bring up some fun little stats. Fuente is 5-6 in alternate jerseys / helmets. I included the matte helmets. This is actually surprisingly a lot better than I figured. And now, if you go back to Beamer's last 5 years, I'd think that record would be a whole lot worse, including the black jerseys that they
Which
wore.
need to be brought back.
Yeah.
The ones
are my
the ones he
favorite
wore
ones.
for his
Those are your
last
favorite
game?
ones?
For Boise State.
I
Boise State
can't
one.
like them
Oh.
because Virginia Tech is 0-2 all time in black jerseys. The
0-3.
Boise State jerseys
and then-
0-3.
If you include the Hokie Stone ones, there's Tennessee.
Okay.
Well, that's great.
Tennessee,
Yeah, I guess
Beamers.
they wore
Yeah.
black helmets.
But I always
something
liked
like
the ones that they wore in Beamer's last game.
I did
Yeah.
too, and except we lost to North Carolina, who
Yeah,
I
wow.
don't like very much. So the most heartbreaking moment of ever being a Virginia Tech fan was losing to Boise State. We were wearing black jerseys, and then you lose Frank Beamer's last home game ever to frickin' UNC, in black jerseys.
Hey, they were ranked.
I think they
They're
look
ranked.
cool, Jake, but
They're
they
good.
bring up too many bad memories.
I think every football team should have some sort of black uniform. I think they're the best.
Fair.
Even the Titans?
Yeah, I would love Titans with black uniforms and like the light blue outlining. I think
That'd
would
be
look great.
sweet. You know, one quick thing on Nick's stat, on the four-game losing streak. In 2018, Virginia Tech lost 4 straight games. 3 of them were at home. In 2020, Virginia Tech lost 4 straight games. 3 of them were at home. Virginia Tech's lost 3 straight games, all of them at home.
I remember towards the end of Beamer's tenure, I wrote an article or two where I detailed Tech's struggles at home against Power 5 teams, or maybe even FBS teams. I think Power 5 teams, though, were when Virginia Tech was picking up wins against Power 5 teams, it was generally on the road, and they were losing all their home games against ACC competition, basically. And I was like, man, this has got to change right here. And then I think we went 6-1 at home or something like that in each of Fuente's first 2 years, and I'm like, this is what we need. We need to win the games where the fans are here and watching. And they started doing that at first, and then it's been all downhill since then.
In my final segment, I know Tech lost, and Sean Tucker did damage on the ground. But if you get the chance, go look at Sean Tucker's Twitter feed. It is frankly hilarious. He always tweets out his performance like he's a high school kid trying to be recruited. And his tweet this week was, finally an ACC win, Syracuse 41, Virginia Tech 36. By the way, this is his tweet. I'm pleased with my performance and happy with the outcome. I ran 20 attempts for 112 yards with 2 receptions for 14 yards. Thanks to my O-line for helping me reach 1,000 yards and more to come. I'm just getting started.
Dudes,
I love it.
That's NIL, buddy.
I love it. Yeah.
And
that's what that's about.
Sean Tucker is also, by the way, the only running back in the country with 1,000 yards.
1,000 yards. I saw that. We can talk a little bit about Sean Tucker in the second half.
We'll do that.
We will.
I
It is also Sean Tucker's birthday today.
Is it?
How do you know that?
I saw Syracuse tweet it out.
It's Sean Tucker Day on the podcast.
Our friend Giovanni Heater liked Syracuse
naturally.
football's tweet
Naturally.
about it being his birthday, and it said, "Be sure to let Sean Tucker know you're pleased with his performance this season."
Well, in that, I guess that's actually very ironic. But one last thing before we go. If this offense plays like the way it did, and they play like this, like at Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech's defense. I know you guys will talk more about this on Wednesday, but like Georgia Tech's defense is not very good. I mean, they rank towards the bottom in most of the categories, and you go on the road to Boston College, who's okay. You go to Miami, who I don't know where they are in tackling now, but they're wishy-washy defensively, and Virginia, who hasn't been able to play defense all year. Those are winnable games if you can score points.
And Duke at home.
Yeah, well, and that too.
That's winnable for sure. Georgia Tech, I was actually studying them this morning while I started writing the preview, and their defense started out strong, like the first 4 games of the season, and in the last 3 games, they have just dropped off a cliff.
Yeah,
it's just like night and day. They can't stop anybody now.
Yeah, but that was my point. Like, if Virginia Tech, if this offense can, obviously it's not going to rush for 250 every game,
if
but
the momentum can carry over.
And if you, like you said, if you can get the defense back up just to where it's not losing you the game, then this is a potential chance. There's 5 games to go.
They're all winnable. They're all winnable, David. And
they're also
losable. And so far this year, those 50-50 games haven't exactly gone in Tech's favor since they were playing UNC. And to be quite frankly, UNC's going to end up being one of the softest teams on Tech's schedule.
Yeah.
Well, we keep finding tangents before the break. I do want to mention quickly, he talked about the alternate jerseys. Tech did a great job with Throwback Day and Lane.
Yeah.
To me, those aren't even alternate jerseys. Those are always the real Virginia Tech football jerseys to me.
Well, it was cool. You had the jerseys, and then the scoreboard was
yeah.
retro, and then they kept throwing up like throwback videos from they had
foul language.
The don't be a jerk cartoons.
Jerk alerts.
Yeah, jerk. Yeah, there you go. Well, I was impressed with it. I think that's something they need to keep doing, kind of themed days in Lane, especially when things aren't going.
I think it's cool, especially when you're playing old Big East foes,
yes.
like when you play your, when you play your Pitts, when you play your Syracuse,
West Virginia next year.
Yeah, West Virginia next year.
Hint, hint.
Yep.
All right, well, we're finally going to take a break here on episode 202 of the Tech Sideline podcast. As always, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. When we get back, we're going to talk about the defense and their struggles against Syracuse's running game on Saturday, and also take a look ahead at those final 5 games and how the Hokies can kind of salvage this season at this point. Stay with us here on episode 202 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll be right back. We welcome you back here on episode 202 of the Tech Sideline podcast, brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. We have our crew on set here on Monday. Still no Will Stewart, as he is still in Florida. We'll be back on Wednesday. David Cunningham across the way, Chris Coleman to my left. In the fourth chair, Nick Brown, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, as always, and I'm Jake Lyman, your host. We're going through Virginia Tech's loss to Syracuse on Saturday, falling to 3-4 on the season. They have 5 games remaining, 4 of which on the road. We've gone through the offense, which was a positive for the Hokies on Saturday for the most part. The defense, not so much. They had probably their worst game of the season against the Orange on Saturday.
Yeah, disappointed to give up some of the big plays in the passing game. And again, it wasn't that many of them. It's just when they needed to get made by Syracuse, they got made. And that's extremely disappointing. Maybe some of that is due to Jermaine Waller being out. But, you know, all of Tech's cornerbacks have played well enough this year where you don't think that should happen against a team that hasn't been able to make any plays in the passing game yet so far this year. So very disappointed there. I didn't think Tech would be able to stop their running game. Just Syracuse has been good at it, and Tech has been trending down as far as stopping the run. That played out. The defensive linemen, generally speaking, seemed to do okay in the preliminary PFF grades. Tay Daly at safety was really good against the run. Jenkins graded out extremely poorly. So did Nasir Peoples. Alan Tisdale was the worst of them all. And Dax was slightly below average. And, some of those guys, like Dax was the best out of some of those individuals I just mentioned, at least as far as the linebackers go. But, he's a fourth-year player now, and he's playing in his natural position, and he's got to do better. And Tisdale, for whatever reason, has progressively gotten worse during the course of his career. And he even put on weight this year, but yet he somehow looks weaker. Or he just seems to be playing weaker. So, and I'm saying this not to single out those players, but again, it seems like there's a player development problem in this program. And I don't know why that is, but that's just what it seems like to me from the outside looking in. Some people look at recruiting, and I look at our 4-star guys that we get. Trey Turner was a 4-star recruit that everybody wanted.
And he hasn't gotten any better.
He hasn't got any better. Tisdale was like a high 3-star guy with a big offer list, and it's gotten worse. Yeah. Dax has been kind of the same guy his whole career. Dax could have gone to Clemson. Yep. So you've got plenty of guys in this program. Devin Hunter, everybody wanted, and he's basically going to end his career as a non-contributor. And you just don't see across-the-board improvement from players in this program, in my opinion, and that is our biggest issue as a program. And generally before this year, it's mostly been a problem on the offensive side of the ball, but it seems to be creeping into like the linebackers now, and even the safeties a little bit. I think, despite their rough day on Saturday, I still think the cornerbacks have developed.
Yeah.
If you think back to their freshman years, like Trey Turner and Jermaine Waller were true freshmen the same year, 2018. Waller played like 50 snaps all year, barely played. Couldn't even beat out Bryce Watts, who is probably the worst starting cornerback in Virginia Tech history. Couldn't get on the field ahead of Bryce Watts. And I'm sorry. The guy ended up transferring to UNC. And then, can't get on the field for UNC,
so
and they can't play defense.
I don't even know where he went.
I don't know, but
he's off the map.
Well, what I'm saying is, and Trey Turner probably played 500 or 600 snaps that year and made a lot of big plays for the Tech offense. Yeah. Since that year, Trey Turner stayed the same player. Jermaine Waller's improved.
The trajectories are just completely different.
Exactly, and that just seems to be the case with Virginia Tech offensive players. And now I'm seeing it creep in a little bit at certain positions on defense too, and that worries me. In this game, outside of the game-winning touchdown, one of the
the plays that keeps rerunning in my head that I feel like perfectly or accurately describes this game is it was one of Garrett Schrader's runs, and he had over 170 yards for the day. It was one of the runs. I want to say it was in the fourth quarter where he just kind of pulled it and went up the middle, and it took like 4 or 5 guys to bring him down, and he just kept churning and churning and churning. And there were a couple guys earlier in the game, people just missing tackles against Sean Tucker and Garrett Schrader, and you need multiple guys to bring him down. And the defensive line got some pressure. I mean, they hit him quite a few times, but it's just the run defense wasn't good enough, missed tackles, and Syracuse just got chunk plays after chunk plays on the ground, and then when they finally turned it up in the air, they couldn't be stopped.
I actually went to the game with a former college quarterback and wide receiver. Didn't play at the Power 5 level or anything like that, but he's a former college football player, and he sat there and told me the whole game. And he's a season ticket holder at Tech, and he goes to all the Tech games, and he's just like, man, our Tech's linebackers just aren't good enough. And I look back at the PFF grades and for this individual game, and he's right. And then I looked at the PFF grades for the whole season, and he's right. And like they're trending down too. Like they're getting worse as the season goes on, and that's extremely concerning. Especially when the offense finally seemed to have found its footing to a certain extent against Syracuse. So we can sit here and say, okay, well, the offense is better now, and maybe they'll be better again this week. But what if the defense continues to trend down?
Yeah.
And then you could also have a complete flip. Defense could get back to where it was, and
Hope
offense
so.
could.
And then Tech would start winning.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Can you duplicate Justin Fuente? Can you have one Justin Fuente coaching the scout, one Justin Fuente coaching the scout team offense, and one coaching the actual offense?
I know.
I have a feeling that comment's not going to go over well on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, probably not
probably
over well. But we're analyzing something here like, I don't know, if Virginia Tech loses to Georgia Tech on Saturday, I feel like it'll be like in a way we haven't seen before, maybe. Maybe all right, so maybe the defense does get back to playing better this week, and maybe the offense does continue.
But the offense turns the ball over.
Or they block a punt for a touchdown. That would be a new one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because Peter Moore's been great.
He's been great. Yeah, it was great again the other day. Had one down at the 2.
Fantastic.
And that ball, that was one of the great, I told my friends, like, this is one of the greatest punts I've ever seen. Landed at the 3 and just stopped at the 2. I was like, that is unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like the
and then Syracuse went 90 yards.
They did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to remember.
Is it fair to say the one position that the Hokies can consistently develop is punter? I mean, AJ Hughes, Oscar Bradburn, and now you got Peter Moore.
Yeah.
You mentioned Garrett Schrader running up the middle and it taking 5 guys to bring him down. I think it kind of shows how the game went. I didn't know which play you were talking about because there were plenty.
Yeah, there were multiple. There was one I think that he had gained 8 or 9 yards, and then 3 guys jumped on top of him, and he got another 7 yards. And
he's very physically similar to Gerard Evans.
Yeah,
he doesn't throw the ball as well as Gerard Evans. I mean, he's got that shot put release or whatever.
But they're about the same.
But they're the same size, same
build.
Pretty similar athletic ability. I mean, Schrader's a guy who can make guys miss, and he can run over them, and he's got good speed. I mean, that guy's a legit runner. What's he got? I think 8 college starts now. He's got close to 1,200 rushing yards in his career. I mean, that's legitimately good.
Yeah, there was
for 12 touchdowns this season.
Yeah, there was one play where he was going towards the north end zone, and he just juked a couple guys out of their shoes, and it's the dude's 6'4", like he's a big guy, but he's that athletic, and he showed it. I mean, as I put in my article, Sean Tucker had 112 yards, and Schrader had 170. That's there's been one instance in each of the last 3 of the last 4 seasons where Virginia Tech has allowed a duo to rush for over 100 yards in a game. It was North Carolina last year. I don't think they had one 2 years ago, but 3 years ago it was against Pitt, and Pitt had 2 guys rush for over 100. So it's just when you face a guy a quarterback who can run especially, it gets really tough.
Yeah, it does. And when you got 2 threats back there that you have to stop. But again, I expected Syracuse to put up big numbers in the running game. So to me, that's not why Tech lost the game.
Yeah.
They did what they did. They did what they do well against what Tech does poorly. It was what Syracuse does poorly. They happened to do fairly well against what Virginia Tech is normally good at defending, and that was what cost Virginia Tech the game.
Well, Garrett Schrader, final stats, 174 yards on the ground, 3 rushing touchdowns, 236 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns.
Who was the ACC Offensive Player of the Week this week?
He was not the quarterback. Hartman was the quarterback.
Oh,
though,
really?
though, to be fair, Wake Forest put up 70.
They only possessed the ball for 17 minutes.
That
Are
was
you serious?
Yes,
they had 17 minutes of possession time and scored 70 points.
And you do that against the triple option of Army?
Yeah, it's true. Our Army's going to have the ball a
The
lot.
bigger question is, how does Army put up 56 points?
Yeah, one of the best tweets from the weekend was it was a screenshot of the box score from Army Wake, and it said the government invests how much into the military? Yeah, the Department of Defense, and allows 70 points in 17 minutes.
This is before y'all's time, but I remember when Virginia Tech played basketball in the Atlantic 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they would play teams like Temple, and Temple would run like a 2-3 matchup zone, and the final score would be like 51-43 Temple, but now this Wake Forest Army game is a football game that like completely blows those old Tech basketball games out of the water as far as points.
Yeah. That I was watching that game just flash on the Lane Stadium scoreboard.
And
it's like every time it would come around, somebody else would score.
It's like, whoa, there's 10 minutes left. We got at least 4 more touchdowns.
Yeah, it was like, all right, it's 56-42. All right, 56-49. Oh, 63-49. It just kept going back and forth.
Yeah.
Anyway, for Syracuse, 7 yards per carry on the ground. But a lot of that was Garrett Schrader. It just seemed like every time he tucked the ball and ran, it was a first down.
Yeah, it didn't really seem like Tech made very many tackles for loss in this game. I have not looked that up, and I don't know. I think they sacked him once, maybe. So there just weren't a lot of negative plays, and he's a guy that even if the initial contact is at 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, he's going to drive for 4 or 5 more. He's just that big. I mean, you've got to be a big, physical, tough team to stop him, and that's just not what Virginia Tech is right now.
You know what stood out to me is I don't know when the moment was, and I wish I would have documented it. But there was at one point in the game where Virginia Tech had no sacks and Syracuse had -1 rushing yard. Syracuse finished with 15 negative rushing yards. So they gained 329. The net was 314. But you only sacked him once, and they had -15 rushing yards. Tech didn't get in the backfield at all. No tackles. I think
3 total TFLs.
3 total tackles for loss.
They haven't gotten in the backfield very much since the North Carolina game, and I
Yeah.
think that tells you a lot more about North Carolina's offense than it does
Yeah.
anything else.
Well, we've talked about how Justin Hamilton has had a lot of success so far in his first season. It just seemed like on Saturday there was a lack of adjustments. It seemed like Syracuse, they were content to run the ball and throw slants over the middle, and they just kept doing it the rest of the
I
game.
would have put as many men in the box as I could, and played as much man coverage as possible. And to be honest, I haven't gone back to look and see what Tech did. For all I know, that's exactly what they did. I mean, they were pretty much in man coverage at the end of the game when they hit that bomb down the field. But that's just the type of plays that Syracuse has not shown the ability in their first 7 games of the season to make at all.
Yeah.
You dare him to make that throw.
Then they did it.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones where it's like, I dare you to do it, and if you do it, congratulations.
Yeah.
There's not much you could do about that. I mean, it was good coverage. Strong's hand was in there.
Yeah.
And Williams hit Schrader. It was just
he's got to go a little bit stronger.
Like
It
you
was
said,
funny.
yeah.
I was walking through the parking lot after the game, walking back to the cage to my tailgate, and I happened to run into a former Virginia Tech defensive back who's played in the NFL in recent seasons, and I stopped him and we talked for a couple minutes, and I don't want to give away who this guy is, but some of you will be able to guess it. But I was basically like, he's real similar to you from a size standpoint at the same stage of your career, and he's like, yeah, he's just got to get stronger though.
Yeah.
And he's right.
But that's the thing. I think like that's one of the guys. Ryan Smith has developed those cornerbacks
Yes,
really
yes.
well.
From a natural skill standpoint, he's done a fantastic
need to
job.
get better development in the weight room.
Correct,
But
right. And,
I mean, that's one of the things going into this season. You talk with Justin Hamilton, you talk to Ryan Smith about, and the corner's been pretty good so far this season. And it's, you have 4 or 5 corners that have game reps because you have guys like Dorian Strong that were true freshmen last season that had to get thrown into the fire, and now they're pretty good. And yes, they had a lot of them had a poor week this week, and nobody was great against Kenny Pickett. But I think in general that is a sign that there is some hope at that position.
Yeah, I absolutely think there's hope at that position, and on the whole, I'm still happy with that position right now on the overall grand scheme of things. My bigger concern is I hope that whatever issues are causing lack of player development at the other positions, I hope it's not like starting to bleed into cornerback, because that's like our last bastion of defense as far as player development goes. But I don't know. I think if you're Virginia Tech, you have to be a player development program. You absolutely have to. It doesn't matter how well you recruit if your players don't develop. I mean, what are we talking? I mean, sat there and went through 4-star guys earlier who came here and they just haven't developed.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
so we
like
can go out
like a Dave Clawson program,
right? So you go out and sign a bunch more 4-star guys this year. Who cares? Because the last ones you recruited haven't developed. Is anything going to change?
That's been talked about a lot, is the recruiting rankings for Virginia Tech, not signing 4-stars, but I would say 70% of the Virginia Tech starters are 4-stars.
Yeah, and I don't
on offense. I mean, you've got
almost everyone.
You've got a 4-star quarterback. You've got 2 4-star receivers. Payut's in the 2 deep, and he was top 5 in the state of Virginia.
Keyshawn King was a 4-star.
Was a 4-star. Holston was a borderline. James Mitchell was a 4-star before he got hurt. So yeah, I mean,
and you look at the offensive line, and those are all really experienced guys.
Tenuta and Smith are considered NFL prospects.
Yeah.
And
Johnny Jordan
he was
all Big Ten honors.
Right, exactly.
Like, you have experience
and guys who were highly rated, and they just haven't developed.
Yeah,
and I hope. I've thought that maybe that was just simply an offensive coaching issue, but now I'm seeing some of the same signs on the defensive side of the ball. Now that we have 7 games of evidence piling up now, so there could be something deeper there, and I think there is something deeper there.
I thought it was interesting what you said in your Sunday Thoughts yesterday about Tisdale. Just how, I know we talked about it a little bit, but how coming into the season, one of the things we asked Justin Fuente about it at Media Day. And he was like, I'm really proud of how he's transformed his life. He had a kid. He's taking on so much as a father figure, but it's really helped him transform his life. And as you pointed out in the stats, his play has not gone up.
I was extremely excited when he got up to 228 pounds, right? And he still has the frame to be bigger. Like, some people might say that's a lot of weight to put on in one off season, but Xavier Adibi put on like 15 between his junior and senior year, and it didn't slow him down at all. He got even better than he already was, and got drafted in the 4th round. Tisdale just looks weaker. Like when he makes contact with someone, they don't go backwards a lot of times. It doesn't get off blocks. He just and I'm not. I want to make it very clear that we're not sitting here bashing players and saying this guy stinks or that guy, because you're seeing it so much across the board that Virginia Tech's players aren't getting better.
The player development.
I don't think correct. It's the player development. The players aren't letting us down. I think it's the player development at Virginia Tech that's letting the players down.
And you could say Amari Barno, too, a guy who everyone thought was going to be a star this year, has kind of fallen into the background. I believe he wasn't even on the field for a few plays on that final drive.
Yeah, Nick, how many tackles did Barno finish with yesterday?
Let's see. Barno had 3 total tackles. 2 of them were assisted.
Okay.
So one solo.
Yeah, and after he had a fantastic performance against North Carolina in the first week of the season, everybody thought this guy's gonna.
He could be a top 2-round guy.
Yeah, and then he's, and as the coaches always say, he's done a lot that doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but you need him to show up in the stat sheet.
Yes, I mean, because look, tackles for loss and sacks are important because they take it from, 2nd and 10 to 2nd and 14, and that's a huge deal, and that ends drives. So, that 98-yard touchdown drive, what if somebody had made a play in the backfield at some point and that had put Syracuse in a long yardage situation.
Even just to lose a yard.
Yeah, right.
Instead of gaining 5.
Second and 6 versus 2nd and 11.
Exactly. It changes everything from play calling to how players themselves, how confident they are in the upcoming play and everything like that. So, yeah, there's just it's just a lot of things seem like they're just not improving enough at Virginia Tech, and in fact are getting worse.
One last thing on the defense before we kind of look big picture. I talked about how the Hokies offense started 4 for 4 on third downs, then finished the game 1 of 8. I think the bigger stat, Syracuse, 4 tries on fourth downs, 4 conversions, including a big one on that last drive.
Yeah, Will went over the fourth down numbers for Virginia Tech this year in his Monday Thoughts article. Is that what you're pulling up?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up because because he put it in his he tweeted it out, and I put it in my article.
The full season numbers.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is 2 of 8 on fourth down this season offensively. Tech's opponents, 12 for 15.
Wow.
12 for 15.
Right.
I'm looking at the camera when I say that because it's just, I mean, it's just impressive. And like you said, Syracuse was 4 for 4. And we saw it last week when it was something we hit on the podcast where Pitt put Kenny Pickett up under center, and he gained, I think, on 4th and 1 twice, he gained 5 total yards. And Braxton Burmeister at one time and couldn't gain a yard. And it's like, opponents are 12 for 15 on fourth down against Virginia Tech. I mean, that is
80% is unreal.
And Tech is 25%.
And I'm really just starting to wonder about the philosophies of this program as far as player sizes and everything like that. Like, I thought Jordan Williams was going to make a big difference on Virginia Tech's defense this year, but that was when I thought he was going to be 317-pound Jordan Williams like he was at Clemson. And now he's 285. And he was allowed to do that because he said, I feel more comfortable at 385. Okay, fair enough. But on 4th and 1, you need your 317-pound dude from Clemson to get in there and make some stops. Yeah. And now he's 285. And not just 285, but it'd be one thing if he was 285 on like a 6'1 frame and he had like these short, stocky legs and everything like that, and he could really plug a gap. But it's 285 on a 6'4", 6'5 frame. Yeah. It's just, he's kind of narrow when you look at him from the side, and I just don't think that's a great philosophy to have when you want to stop the other team from running the football.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel like linebackers, or at least Dax, is a little undersized too. I mean, just in general, this comes back to your point about, because there's one thing I noticed during the game. There was one drive where I think at defensive end, it was Barno on one end, and I think maybe Jalen Griffin on another end, and we talked a lot, especially in the preseason, about just how, especially up front, there's a lot of guys that Bud Foster recruited that were in his scheme, and he always recruited undersized guys. And I think that kind of shows it a little bit when you've got a lot of guys that are undersized that just can't make plays when it comes down to it.
You're right. You're still seeing Eli Adams on the field for 15 or 20 plays a game, and he's 5'11". He was not recruited to the scheme, so let's talk about that again too. I mean, this is not all just
this is
he still has to play,
but a lot of Bud Foster's players.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they're just two different schemes, man. Yeah. And J-Ham's coaching the scheme that he feels the most comfortable in, and ultimately J-Ham only spent 1 year in Bud Foster's scheme when he was in college. Remember, he was a running back and a wide receiver before he was ever a safety, and he only played safety at 1 year at Virginia Tech. I mean, he spent more time in the Saban-Belichick scheme in the NFL than he did in the Bud Foster scheme. So he just knows more about those other schemes, really, to a certain extent. So he's coaching the scheme that he feels most comfortable coaching, which he absolutely should do.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it is a different type of scheme, and they have different templates for defensive players that don't match up with the type that Bud Foster and Charlie Wiles were recruiting at the end of their tenure. So this was never going to be like an overnight transition process for the defense. Like, they weren't going to go from being bad to great overnight. They have improved since last year.
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit more difficult when you have a lot of guys that aren't the body type,
right.
body type you want. And I think that goes back to what you said, Jake, the fourth down conversion. I mean, when you go and away from the defense a little bit, just momentum wise, when you can convert 4 fourth downs,
it gives you so much confidence.
It's
even as a coach, if you're just capable of completely blowing the other team off the ball and picking up a first down.
Unless you're in your own territory, 4 downs.
If it's like 3rd and 6, you're like, you know what? We don't need to get 6 yards here. We'll just get 4.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's four unless you're like at your own 30-yard line. It's 4 down territory the whole way down the field.
Right.
And that's earlier this season, Virginia Tech was fantastic on third down. I think they were letting opponents convert like 21, 22, 23%. I haven't looked to see what that percentage is now. Maybe Nick can look that up for us. But when you let people convert 80% on fourth down, they're like, okay, we don't need to convert on third down.
I would say, I guess you'd have to look at the numbers and determine this, but if I was an opposing coach and my offense had the ball in plus territory against Virginia Tech and it was 4th and 3 or less,
go for it.
The percentages say go for it.
Yeah.
Right? You can shove this defense off the ball and pick up those 3 yards. And a normal situation would dictate you punt there. But there's enough evidence built up now that Tech's not going to be able to stop you on those short yardage plays. You could steal an extra touchdown.
Yeah, especially if it's 4th and 1.
Yeah.
Well, and you've seen that trend in college, but also the NFL. I want to say it was the Chargers like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They went for it on fourth down 8 times in one game and went 7 for 8.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So we talked about the defense. Obviously, a lot of struggle on Saturday against Syracuse. But where do the Hokies kind of go from here? You've got 4 of your last 5 on the road. You're sitting at 3 and 4. Have to win 3 just to get into a bowl. Does that seem realistic at this point?
To be honest, no. But it's not impossible because except for the Pitt game, all the losses have been right there, So Virginia Tech is going to have an opportunity to win 3 more football games. Absolutely an opportunity, at least 3 opportunities to win. No question in my mind. Or are they going to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, though? Or is something new going to pop up each week and say, gosh, well, we did this thing right this week, but this time around we got a punt block for a touchdown and lost by 4 or something like that. It just seems like there's something new all the time these days.
Like you said, something new every week. And the way I look at it is, I think it was funny, or I guess ironic. I was chatting with one of my friends after the game, and I said, if you had told me at the beginning of the season that you look at the schedule at the beginning of the season, and you would have said, okay, the first six games are the tougher part of the schedule. The back 6, you've got Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Boston College, and Duke. 4 straight games. Those are all really winnable games. Tech couldn't even beat Syracuse, and that's where me personally, I'm like, I don't know where their confidence level is, but my confidence level in the team being able to get a result isn't really there. But like we said before, they're all winnable games. They're also losable games, but you have a chance to win them all. Tech is going to be in the position to win every single game because the only game they haven't been in a position to win this season against Pitt.
And that was just a horrible matchup.
And Pitt might be Pitt is Pitt's
top
what,
15
17 in the AP poll right now.
Oh, they should be top 15.
Pitt is a good
Clemson
team.
Around like they
were. Yeah. In every single other game this season, Virginia Tech has had a chance to win, and I think in the last 5 games of the season, it's going to come down to that. Virginia Tech will have chances to win. Can they take advantage of that? When you go last game of the season, when you go at UVA, how are you going to stop that Virginia offense?
Right. You can slow them down, and it just doesn't, outside of the Syracuse game, but doesn't seem like Tech's going to score enough.
And so there's a lot of is it going to be enough balance between the two sides to be able to confidently take advantage of those?
Well, and it seems like it may come down to that UVA game. You think Duke's probably a winnable game, maybe Georgia Tech this weekend, but Miami looked decent this week.
Yeah, the thing about Miami is they're improving with their backup quarterback.
Yes.
They lost their starting quarterback. Now they've lost their starting running back, right? And they still went up there and dropped how many on NC State?
It was 31-30, and they played well defensively.
Right. And they had scored 40 the week before, right?
They were tight with North Carolina.
And they should have won that game,
right,
too.
Certainly could have won that game.
They're just figuring it. It was interesting listening to Manny Diaz after the game because I think his comments are very similar to what Justin Fuente would have said had Virginia Tech won the game, which was, our players have worked so hard, and of course it's coach speak, but our players have worked so hard for this opportunity, and they finally got over the hump. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly what Justin Fuente would have said had Virginia Tech won. But Miami's starting to figure it out, and at the beginning of the season, when Miami got blown out by Alabama, and they were kind of downhill sledding, you would have been like, all right, Virginia Tech is going to, all Virginia Tech's going to have to do is score like 20 points in Miami and win, and now it's Miami's on a roll.
Yeah, that
What?
was extremely disappointing for NC State.
Yes.
That really hurts their Atlantic Division chances.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, we've been talking about the ACC's nightmare of a Pitt Wake Forest ACC
I think that'd be
championship game.
fun.
That seems almost all but cemented.
I'm kind
at
of
this
excited
point.
for that.
Yeah.
Pitt is the only team in the Coastal with less than 2 losses. They're still undefeated in
Yeah.
the ACC, and then Wake now the only undefeated team in the Atlantic. NC State the only team with 1 loss after Clemson loses.
And
to
NC
Pitt.
State and Wake still have to play each other.
Yeah.
Yes, so
No, the thing is, NC State could win that game, but as long as like Wake beats Clemson, which I don't think Clemson can score enough points to beat Wake.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound strange to say?
You know what was one of the most intriguing stats I saw today? Clemson is one of 2 teams that has not scored more than 20 points against Power 5 competitions this season.
Wow.
And I don't remember what the other team was. Nick, if you search that on Twitter, you might be able to find it. But it might have been like Arizona. I mean, it was somebody who
Possible.
it was somebody who
Arizona's
wasn't
worst
somebody
team.
who wasn't very good. And Clemson, and it's like
Clemson.
Clemson.
How?
Yeah, and that's the point we're at. But all these games, back to this, all these games are winnable. It's whether you can take advantage of that, because the offense is going to have to play well when you go to UVA.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to. It's going to be a shootout with Brennan Armstrong. Can you score enough points? Okay, the offense got back on track this week, but what about the defense now? I mean, it's like you said, something different every single week.
I think the most winnable game of those 5 is Duke. I think we
Yes.
would all agree on that.
Yeah,
I think the second most winnable one is Georgia Tech.
I would say this week.
Yeah, and so that makes this game very important this weekend. If you don't win it, then you've got to win 3 of your last 4. The problem is like Duke's not very good at anything, but they can run the football.
Yes.
And then guess what Virginia Tech can't do? Stop the run. Georgia Tech's been able to run the football this year. generally
and
speaking.
BC, I'm not 100% sure, but Phil Dracovic could be coming back soon.
Yeah,
I
I know he's still not back.
I don't know
but
what the timeline
we're
is.
getting around that point where people will start talking about, oh, can he come back this week?
Yes.
Maybe so. That makes them a much better football team.
on a short week
Yeah,
in Chestnut
yeah,
Hill.
because Clemson would have one more loss if that dude had been playing in that week.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, before we get to YouTube questions, I'm going to take all of them away. We got to talk about kind of the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
Justin Fuente had his presser this morning. He's still around after the loss to Syracuse.
Yeah.
At what point does it seem like it's too late to make a move in season and you're still waiting to see how things turn out towards the end of it?
Yeah, there is a point where if an in-season move is being considered, all of a sudden it's too late and it doesn't matter anymore.
Yes.
Right. I think I don't know what point that is. To me, it would be like if Virginia Tech loses to Georgia Tech and you don't do it then there's just no point after that. And it could also be that with the defense trending down, that it kind of makes it a bad look to give it to Justin Hamilton, right? Because the defense hasn't been playing as well recently, and they just like what if Whit Babcock had decided to, like, you know what, Tech lost to Syracuse, I'm going to make a change, and by the way, the guy whose defense just gave up 41 points and a deep bomb to lose the game is now the head coach, right? So there's just you'd be grasping at straws to a certain extent. I'm not against it or for it. I don't think there's anything. I would be shocked if anything happened where Fuente could save his job this year. So to me, I don't want this to happen because I would rather the man succeed and not have to spend $10 million on him, right? But it just doesn't look like that's going to happen. So to me, it's a question of when and not if. I did. I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't start my column until late yesterday afternoon because I sat around waiting to see if anything was going to happen on Sunday. And so I do think it's possible that something could happen in the middle of the season or not.
Yeah.
And, like I said, it doesn't really matter to me either way. Look, Tech lost the bowl streak last year. This is a long-term play. And whether or not Virginia Tech goes 5-0 or 0-5 down the stretch, it's pretty darn irrelevant for the long-term future of the program. So it's like I'm not even thinking about Georgia Tech right now. I'm honestly thinking down the line, and I guess I don't like to kick dirt on anybody in their grave before they're fully in there, right?
Yeah.
But it's just that seems like the direction we're heading.
Yeah. To go along with Chris, I mean, like, you said like, you're going to be in Atlanta this weekend for the World Series, but you might not even go to the game, and I don't blame you. It's gotten to the point where like I'm covering the team, but I'm going to take the last 6 results, including Syracuse, with a grain of salt, because in all honesty, I was asked by Wes McElroy on 910 The Fan in Richmond on Friday. I go on there every week, and he asked me to fill in the blank. If Syracuse wins blank, if Virginia Tech wins blank, and I was kind of like, I guess it's just Virginia Tech has a little bit more confidence that they win. If Syracuse wins, it's kind of the same trajectory it's already on. The program right now, it seems like something's going to happen. And I feel like you can tell it's coming, because just I think he's lost a lot of the fan base.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were all at the game. You guys all heard the Fire Fuente chants.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's hard to come back from that.
And after a loss like that, you've lost 3 straight games at home. And as I kind of sat and thought about it earlier, I mean, you had miscues in 2018. You had the bad loss to Duke in 2019, but you rebounded and ended up winning 8 games. You went 5-6 at the end of. You finished 5-6 last year, and I think it's just things adding up. And you asked Jake when does it feel right, and I don't know if it's a decision what Babcock makes during the season, because I think if you do, like Chris said, if you say, okay, well, I'm going to give it to Justin Hamilton, interim head coach, and he just gave up 41 points to Syracuse, I don't know I don't know how much confidence that brings when you have somebody like that. But also, I would look at it as I was talking about with Chris before the show, if Whit Babcock gets rid of Justin Fuente mid-season, if they had done it today, you have 5 games remaining, but he's not going to be the only guy leaving. There's going to be some guys that are loyal to Justin Fuente that are saying, well, I'm going to leave now.
Yeah.
And then you've got not a complete staff sitting there looking around, trying to figure out, well, what their next job is going to be.
What grad assistant is the new quarterback's coach? And who's going to call the plays now?
And you'll have people you'll have people who, assuming that happens, Tech would be looking for a new head coach, and you'll have assistants going, okay, well, where can I find my next job? Because
Sure.
I'm not going to be sticking around here
One
either.
foot out the door.
So directions, everybody's going to be looking other places. And then, I mean, we've talked about max exoduses in the past, players of the transfer portal. I mean, imagine one of the guys we've talked about on here, players trust and believe in Justin Fuente. You get rid of him mid-season, I think people have confidence in Justin Hamilton, but you lose part of the locker room, and then I think it just kind of goes downhill from there. And I don't think it would be any better than it, and so why at this point wait till the end after the UVA game?
Yeah, I mean, the time to do it was this past.
Yeah,
if you were going to do it, and I just thought about this. Virginia Tech plays Boston College on a Friday night, the week after the Georgia Tech game.
Yeah,
so that's a short week. You don't change football coaches on a short week.
Yes.
So if anything, like it would not. So that makes me think there's no chance it happens after Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Maybe if Tech lost to BC, it would
But
happen
at that
after that
point,
because you're in a long week. But then again, you only got
there's only 3 games
what's the
left.
point?
Yeah.
So it seems like this past weekend was kind of last exit ramp.
Yeah,
before the end.
and it's interesting because I kind of went into today's press conference. Tech sent out the media availability, and I kind of went into Tech's press conference today like, if Whit Babcock walks into the room and announces that Justin Fuente is no longer the head coach, I would have been like, I would not be surprised.
Shocked
it would not have fazed me. But I'm also not surprised that it didn't happen. And like Chris is saying, there's no point to fire your head coach with 3 games left. At that point, just wait out the 3 games. That way you contain the program. And
then it wouldn't get lowered until December 16th.
Oh, okay, so they would have to
and
wait
I don't think you could wait that long because of signing day.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things, man. Look, I want to win football games right now like everybody else.
Yeah.
Probably the best case scenario for Virginia Tech is to win out and then he takes another job. So everybody can quit talking about it.
Yeah.
That Virginia Tech is not going to win out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we all know what's coming now. It's just a matter of when. And so it's like, I am so interested in the future that I'm not. It's really hard for me to sit there and say
And focus on
let me do a lot of research on Georgia Tech and see what's going to happen in this game. And it's not. I don't want to say that I'm not interested in watching them play, because I'm interested in seeing how many carries Malachi Thomas gets and stuff like that this week. But like, if you have a deep emotional connection to Virginia Tech football, some people handle losses differently, and some people get angry. You know, I'm more the type I get sad and depressed, and nobody likes to feel that way, right? Yeah. So, and then when we sit here on this podcast and we talk about the previous game, when I write a column on Sunday and then obviously go or watch the game on Saturday, depending on whether it's a home game or a road game. So it's like I relive every loss 3 times.
Yeah.
So like Virginia Tech has lost 4 games now. I feel like we've lost 12 games, right? Yeah. I'm so tired of the season, and I want it to end as soon as possible, and so we can figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be, like Chris and you said, Jake, if there was going to be a time to do it, it probably would have been today. With 5 games to go, after losing 3 straight games at home, and now it's, I don't know if this team is going to win 3 games to get bowl eligible. Let's assume the team does not win 3 games, and so the team wins 2 games, finishes 5-7 after the UVA game. We'll say Tech wins the UVA game just because. But after the UVA game, you part ways with Justin Fuente. Tech's not going to a bowl. Your season's over. Coaching staff change, new head coach comes in, and that's that. And I think that's the best way to do it at this point.
I agree. And now I think some people would make the argument, well, if Justin Hamilton's going to be the internal candidate, then
that's fair. Then
go ahead and do it as soon as possible so he gets his trial run like Dabo Swinney got at Clemson or whatever, right? But the thing is, like, I'm more and more believing that J-Ham's not going to be a legitimate candidate for the job. I'm sure he'll get an interview. I don't think Whit Babcock wants to hire him as head coach, though, is my gut feeling.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you make the change right now and J-Ham magically starts winning, then a lot of people are into a corner. Almost forces you to hire him, even if you don't think he's the right man for the job long term.
I agree, and I think
so. And this has to be a long term decision, not a short term decision.
Yeah. Well, and one of the questions I would bring up was one of the reasons. Yes, we've seen Justin Hamilton grow this defense, but he is only in his second year. He's not even done with his second year as a defensive coordinator, but is part of the reason why he's been so successful that Justin Fuente was running the scout team.
Who knows?
Like, if Justin if we go out this week and Virginia Tech gives up 40 points to Georgia Tech, then it's like you've given up 2 points, 40 points of back-to-back games.
Everybody performs higher level when the head coach's eyes are on him, it seems like, around here. So, and then all of a sudden the head coach's eyes get back on the offensive players this week, and they start playing better.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I don't think there's – I know we have to do this for the next month, but there's not.
Well,
really
luckily, basketball season starts.
Basketball
14
season
days,
starting,
I believe, isn't it?
Yes, 2 weeks from
2
tomorrow.
weeks from tomorrow. That's exciting.
One more hypothetical before we jump into the YouTube chat. If the game finished 17-13 Syracuse on Saturday, is Justin Fuente still the Virginia Tech head coach right now?
Yes, because of all the reasons I just.
So you still think?
I don't think Babcock wants to make J-Ham the next coach. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but I think he's way on down the list. But if some miracle happened and you put him at interim head coach and they just started winning, given this fan base's obsession with Virginia Tech guys, it would almost force him to hire Justin Hamilton at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that 100%. And if you're not going to do that, then it just causes a max exodus in the middle of the season, and it causes more problems.
Right.
I mean, imagine this is just me thinking personally because I would have to cover all of that. But imagine imagine the PR nightmare that comes with firing a head coach and then having 15 players enter the transfer portal. Then it's like, what's the point of do it at the.
You can't make this decision based on the transfer portal. You can't make this decision based on any current recruit in this class.
Yeah.
You base this decision on the long-term future of the program, and that's just how it's got to be, man. And if you promote Justin Hamilton to interim head coach right now, and you start winning magically, then that's going to cause emotions in the fan base, and it'll cause emotional decisions to be made in general. And we need a rational decision to get made at the end of the season, not one based on emotions.
All right, well, let's check in on our YouTube chat. With
we don't really have any today.
Really?
Okay.
No.
None at least that are suitable to say on the air.
Yeah, I mean, there's one that was like, what's up with the D line?
Yeah, okay, I can talk about that. The D line actually graded out okay against Syracuse. Not dominant, but if you look at their grades, Fuga was slightly above average. Garbutt and Barno were above average. I'm talking about run defense or not anything else. The biggest issue is the run fits of those linebackers and safeties, or at least any safety not named Tay Daly.
Yeah.
Those are the absolute biggest issues on the defense right now.
And then the only other one I really saw was Jalen Holston. Why has he disappeared? But
two backs.
Then
man.
Malachi Thomas comes in.
If we go back to a 3-rack rotation after this past week, I will lose my mind.
I was about to say your head would explode.
Look, listen, like Jalen Holston is a great fit for the program, great culture guy. He's worked his tail off, and I think there was a point in his career where he had potential as a player, but he got hurt a lot early in his career, and I think that slowed down his development, but I think it also slowed him down physically. I don't think he looks less athletic now than he did earlier in his career because it's all lower body injuries and things like that, and that's obviously not too good.
Well, and any injury also you have to get your confidence back in that.
Yeah. And so at this point, I hate it for him, but at this point you have to do what's best for the football team, and you got to do what's best for Malachi Thomas because if you're not going to redshirt him, you got to play him.
No, and I would say you have to do what's best for the future.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, and Malachi Thomas is the future.
Right.
As I said, from my research, he's the only Virginia Tech player ever as a true freshman to rush for 3 touchdowns in a game.
Right.
And there's a long list of players that have rushed for 3 touchdowns in a game, including Michael Vick, who did it as a redshirt freshman. I mean, like the amount of redshirt freshmen I found, by the way, which was very impressive. I mean, I think like Ryan Williams and Darren Evans might have both done it as a redshirt freshman. But to that point, Nick, I think we've talked about shrinking the running back room, especially Chris. You got to shrink it down. You can't be giving 4 different guys the ball, and you've got 2 now with Malachi Thomas and Raheem Blackshear. And I think Jalen Holston, I think he was good in short yardage situations, but I don't think he was good enough to basically say, yes, I'll give him that many. I'll take away some carries from the rest of the guys to give him those.
Yeah, and it's just that's football. It's a highly competitive sport, and the decision's been made, and the decision needs to be pressed on with. And Malachi Thomas is a great evaluation by Adam Lechtenberg. I want to say he was ranked the number 86 player in Georgia, and like outside the top 1,100 nationally coming out of high school.
He was unranked before he committed.
Right, and I know he had like 1 or 2 other Power 5 offers, but the non-Power 5 schools who
you said
offered
like
him,
Cincinnati, right?
Cincinnati, USF or UCF, Coastal Carolina, App State.
Mm-hmm.
The good,
possibly the 4 best
G5
exactly, the ones that know how to identify under the radar talent, and they all offered him.
Yeah.
That's a great evaluation by Adam Lechtenberg, who I think in his short, like the 2 running backs that are playing for Virginia Tech right now were both Adam Lechtenberg guys.
Yeah.
But Khalil Herbert was a guy Adam Lechtenberg brought in, and now Raheem Blackshear was a guy Adam Lechtenberg brought in, and Malachi Thomas is a guy Adam Lechtenberg brought in. Now, granted, a couple of those guys were, of course, grad transfers, and it's easier to evaluate guys against college competition than it is high school competition. But the point still stands. The 3 dudes he's brought in who have gotten on the field have been good.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I know Virginia Tech evaluated Sean Tucker, and I know Zon Burden chose not to offer Sean Tucker because he didn't think he was quite good enough. And Justin Fuente has always said that the most important part of recruiting for Virginia Tech is evaluation, and he is absolutely right. His problem was he surrounded himself with too many guys like Burden who weren't good evaluators, and that's hurt us in running back recruiting. Mm-hmm. I hate it from the standpoint that, like, now I think we have a guy who was competent to do it, and now everything's going to change and start all over.
Well, and that was, I think, one of the most disappointing parts. Like, I tweeted out my stat after the game, and I think I probably had like 7 or 8 replies, and most of them were, "All right, so where's he going to transfer when Fuente's fired?" And it's just disappointing. It's just disappointing to think about. But yeah, you're right, and I think if there was a player development switch in there too, you bring in great running backs, and then you can develop them. You can get them in the weight room. You can get their body right. I mean, imagine what Malachi Thomas could do with the right player development.
Absolutely. I mean, the frame is there for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 6 feet tall. He's listed at 197. He looks more like 187 to me. It's just, I would say that's just how he looks physically. But I mean, the frame is there for him to be, 200 to 210 pound range, and he'll get thicker and he'll fill out and everything like that. And those 151 yards, he's going to break a couple tackles, and they're going to turn into 181 yards.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Like Will said, Will described him as Lee Suggs in his
vision.
Monday thoughts.
His vision was excellent, and I went back and his 2 long runs in particular, excellent vision out of the pistol formation. In both times, I love the pistol formation.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick, for getting those for us, and thank you to everybody who dropped a comment or question in the YouTube chat. I think that's going to about wrap up episode 202 of the Tech Sideline podcast, looking back at the loss to Syracuse. Chris, what's coming up over the next couple days on TechSideline.com?
Should have our normal Brandon Patterson article, preview podcast on Wednesday. Yeah. I'll do an Inside the Numbers, I think, on Thursday. Maybe a Q&A on Friday, maybe not, because I'm leaving on Thursday night, depending on how much I can get done between now and then. But it's gotten to one of these points. Like, I'm glad to be going to the World Series, and I'm glad it's happening this year, because I actually really don't have anything else to say about our football program until something happens.
Because you said everything it needs to be said.
I've said everything that I can possibly say at this point.
Like 3
and I'm just
times.
going to be repeating myself until the end of the season, and so it's a good time to take a little break, I think.
Well, and the good news is probably starting next week, I would assume, we'll start doing half and half basketball.
Yes, and actually that's one. Forgive me in advance, because I know this is a football-centric school, but I might personally do a little more with basketball towards the end of football season, just because I don't have anything else to say about football.
Well, I'm stoked. I hope everybody got a chance to read my Justin Mutz story I put out.
That was awesome.
Great story.
It was awesome. That is a unique dude.
Yeah, no, but those are the type of guys, and I'm excited because we'll have Chris Hirons covering our women's basketball team, and they're an interesting program too, and they're going to be really exciting to watch. But just stuff like this makes me even more excited for Virginia Tech basketball, and I assume we'll be putting out our basketball preview stuff sometime.
We have to plan that.
Yeah. That we'll get on that.
Well, and men's basketball, a very interesting non-conference schedule. Memphis, Dayton, St. Bonaventure.
And guess what? 2 weeks from tomorrow, doubleheader men's and women's basketball season opener. So that's
Davidson at 5 o'clock
and Maine at 8 o'clock. So I mean, basketball season's almost here, and people might not have to gouge their eyes.
Hang on, Hokies fans. We're almost there.
And now we have you, which means
you
I
can
actually
go to the games and enjoy them.
That's amazing.
There you
go.
Well, if you want to look back at more football content from the weekend, David's recap article up on TechSideline.com, as well as Chris's Sunday, and Will has his Monday thoughts, doing work even while he's on vacation, and we we it.
He'll Jack Brizendines TTL notes.
Yes, Tech Talk Live
tonight.
Yeah, Jack Brizendine.
That'll be
will get
very
on
interesting.
Those.
Yeah,
I am excited. I will be there, so I'm excited to see how all that goes. Wednesday we will be back. I believe will be back over there, but we appreciate David filling in today. We'll have a full Georgia Tech preview, getting ready for the Hokies trip to Atlanta on Saturday. First trip on the road in 6 weeks. So
wow.
Yep.
Yeah, and the first time playing Georgia Tech in 2 years.
And now we're about to have 4 trips on the road in 5 weeks.
Yes.
Craziest schedule.
Very strange schedule. Well, again, want to thank David for sitting over in Will's chair today. David Cunningham, managing editor of TechSideline.com. You can find him at TheRealDCunna on Twitter. Chris Coleman, the lead analyst and columnist at TechSideline.com. Chris Coleman, TSL on Twitter. Nick Brown, again, doing a great job in the fourth chair. Tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter.
Nick Brown 33.
There you go. I need to remember that. I'm Jake Lyman, your host, and as always, behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart doing a great job as our producer. We hope you have a great start to your week, Hokies fans. We'll see you on Wednesday for the Georgia Tech preview.